Hi, Biology Concepts. In this set of notes, we are going to be continuing our learning on Learning Target 5. Today, we are going to focus on proteins and nucleic acids. Learning Target 5 states, I can compare, contrast, and diagram the function and structure of 4 types of carbon-based macromolecules. Today, we will focus on proteins and nucleic acids. So just to review, in the last set of notes, you learned about carbohydrates and lipids. In this set of notes, we will be learning about proteins and nucleic acids, which are the other 2 of the 4 major groups of organic-based compounds. So just to review, carbohydrates are sugar molecules. They provide a fast and short-term release and storage of energy. They are rings of carbon, such as pentagons and hexagons. So this is an example of glucose, sugar, which is 1 ring of carbon atoms. And fructose is another ring. We have a hexagon here and a pentagon. This is a very special shape for sugars. You also learned that there are complex forms of sugar, which is when many of those rings are bonded together in very long chains. So this is like, imagine one of these was a bead, and you put many of these beads on really long, multi-connected strands of string. So think about it that way. So this is your carbohydrate. Foods that contain carbohydrates included, it had potatoes, whole grains, and then the unhealthy forms of carbohydrates were things like donuts and candy. You learned that lipids are examples of fats. Lipids are similar to carbohydrates because they also provide energy, but in comparison, lipids are long-term. So think L for lipid, L for long-term, release of energy very slowly. And lipids include long chains of carbons that are straight. So this is like a long straight chain of carbons, but sometimes it's illustrated in a jagged line. So this is an example, and then you can also see, I didn't have the picture here, but sometimes the carbon is unlabeled, and so it's basically just really long strands that are kind of jagged. All right, some new content today. We will be learning about molecules called protein. The function of proteins, there are many. There are many jobs that proteins do, including controlling chemical reactions. The types of proteins that do this are called enzymes. Proteins also control metabolism, which is how fast you digest your food. Proteins also form the structure of your cells. Examples include your nails, the hair on your head and on your body. Some proteins are called hormones, and hormones are important because they act as messengers. They carry messages around the body and tell different parts of the body to do things. You've probably, for example, learned about estrogen and testosterone in health class, or you will at some point. Those are examples of hormones produced in different amounts in biological males and females that helps control the development of reproductive organs. And so it's basically their messages sent from the brain to those organs that tell them to develop or do certain things. Proteins are the most diverse group of molecules, meaning there are more different types of proteins than there are any other type of molecule in your body. So there's a great diversity of them. And perhaps most importantly, in order to summarize all of these, I want you to think of proteins as the things that do the jobs. They are, like when you think about, if you were to use an analogy of like a store, imagine a store is a cell, and all of the people that are inside doing jobs in that store, those are the proteins. So they do all of the different things, whether it's like using the cash register, maybe it's stocking the shelves, maybe it's being the manager, maybe it's being the custodian. All of these different people have different jobs, just like different proteins have different jobs in your cells. Here's some pictures to show examples. So we talked about how enzymes are a type of protein that control chemical reactions. So for example, if you eat food Imagine in your stomach you've got a bunch of these proteins floating around, and if you eat a thing of sugar, the sugar will bind to your protein enzyme, and the enzyme will break that sugar into smaller pieces so that your body can use it. Another picture here is the structure of a strand of your hair. If you were to look really, really close at your strand of hair, you would find that there are long proteins inside of your hair that make it stronger. It's called keratin. The structure of proteins. The monomer, or small building block of a protein, is called an amino acid. The polymer form is the protein, so the polymer is the name of the group of molecules. Sometimes you will hear someone call proteins a polypeptide, and that refers to the types of bonds found inside of a protein, but we will call them proteins. So I want you to label this diagram on your notes. Each of these beads is an amino acid, and if you were to put many of them together in a long chain, it forms the protein. So make sure you pause and label your diagram. Okay. Here's some more examples of proteins. We talked about hormones. One example of a type of hormone is called a growth hormone. And right now, as you're getting bigger and getting older, part of your brain is producing these or making these proteins. And these proteins go into your bloodstream and they travel through your body and they go to your muscles and to some of your organs and to your bones. And these growth hormones stimulate these parts of the body and tell them to divide the cells, to make more cells so that your body gets bigger. Pretty cool. We talked a little bit about enzymes that help you digest your food. Here's another example. So imagine you drink a glass of milk and you drink some lactose milk sugar. And when you have that milk floating around in your stomach, there's an enzyme that acts like a pair of scissors, and that enzyme is called lactase. And that enzyme will break apart lactose into smaller pieces so that your body can more easily use these sugars for energy. So that's one example of an enzyme that helps make chemical reactions happen in your body. We talked about types of types of proteins that make strong cells in your body. Keratin is an example of something you would find that builds your fingernails, your toenails. If you were to look at animals, for example, cows and animals that have hooves, their hoof is made of this type of molecule or protein as well. And I mentioned your hair. Part of your skin layers are made of keratin too. That must give it its tough area. And if you have calluses, like areas of your skin that are harder, that is very rich in keratin. And muscle proteins are very important because they build muscle. So all of your muscle is rich in protein. This is why, for example, if you eat, if you are a meat eater and if you eat chicken or if you eat beef, you are eating their muscle, which is why those foods are considered to be protein-rich foods, because you are literally eating the muscle protein that builds their body. I thought this was kind of a fun fact that I found. The average human body contains 11 to 13 pounds of just proteins that build the muscle. You have lots more weight that is the muscle tissue itself, but just in terms of the proteins that make this up, 13 pounds on average. It's pretty amazing. I need to clarify a frequent misunderstanding about proteins. A lot of my athletes associate protein with energy source, and that is not true. Eating a diet full of protein does not give you energy. The molecules we're learning about that do give energy are carbohydrate sugars or lipid fats. But your body does not use protein as a source of energy. The reason why athletes should have diets rich in protein is because, as we mentioned, protein is used to build strong cells, like strong muscles, but it does not provide energy. So just wanted to make sure I emphasized that here. All right. So examples of foods that are rich in protein, as I mentioned, if you eat animals, you've got chicken, here's a slab of beef, here's some fish. All of these are considered to be rich in protein because you're eating the muscle of these animals. Eggs are very rich in protein. Spinach is a fantastic power food. So athletes should be eating a lot of spinach because it has tons of vitamins and nutrients and lots of protein. Nuts and legumes and seeds have protein. Potatoes have some protein. Beans have a lot of protein. Some dairy products and cheese. Examples of vegetarian protein include things like legumes, including peas, soybeans, nuts, lots of these tofu, soybeans, they all provide. Lentils are another great source of, and green beans are also great sources of protein. All right, let's dive into our last major group of organic compounds. These are called nucleic acids. It sounds like a fancy word, but you've actually heard of one type of nucleic acid before, and that is DNA. So the function of nucleic acids is they are a molecule that is kind of like an instruction manual. They tell a cell how to do their job. So it's kind of like if we were to use the store analogy again, imagine a store is like a cell. The employee handbook is a set of rules that tells everyone how to do their job. I want you to think of that as like your nucleic acid. It's a set of rules, it's a language that tells the store, the cell, how to work. In fancier words, this means that the nucleic acids actually store in a form of language and share that language. In this case, it's called genetic information. So nucleic acids store and share genetic information, which can be passed from parent to offspring. So for example, in your body, in all of your cells in your body, is the DNA that you inherited from both of your biological parents. If we were to use the store analogy again, sometimes you have an original store, and maybe that original store is so successful that they launch another store, and they could share their information with that baby store in the form of like an employee handbook. So that's an example of how nucleic acids work. It's like a language that provides information for how something should work or function. There are two types of nucleic acids, and these are easy to remember because the Na in their name comes from nucleic acids. So one type of nucleic acid that you've heard of before is called DNA. Your DNA is the instruction manual in your cells that is what makes you unique in comparison to me and in comparison to all of the other living species on this planet. You also have a type of nucleic acid called RNA that is floating around in your cells. And we will learn more about RNA later this year. And we'll also learn more about DNA too. But if you're not familiar with this one, don't worry about it. And we'll talk about both of them. So another way to think about this, so if you were to zoom in and look at the cell of an organism and zoom into the nucleus, this is where you would find this DNA code. So maybe this double helix structure looks familiar to you, and it's like a language that tells a cell how to make it function. In this case, it's a language that's telling this plant cell how to photosynthesize and capture sunlight energy, etc. Oh, that is a typo. That should say structure of nucleic acids. Sorry. So the monomer of a nucleic acid is a nucleotide. Again, another easy way to remember this is the prefix nucle is similar to nucleic acid. So a nucleotide is a building block of a nucleic acid. And there are three parts of our nucleotides. Don't worry about memorizing all of these right now, but I do want you to just, if you can see this picture, I want you to be able to tell me that this is a nucleotide. And you can tell it's a nucleotide because there's a circle, a pentagon, and a square. We will learn more about each of these parts later. I want you to label them for now, but don't worry about memorizing them, okay? So this circle is what we call a phosphate group. And this pentagon, similar to the sugar carbohydrates we learned already, this is actually a sugar found inside of your DNA. Your DNA contains sugar. And this rectangle piece is called a nitrogen-rich base, meaning there's lots of nitrogen atoms in this part of the overall nucleotide. And if we were to take many of these nucleotides and put them together in a long chain, you would get the nucleic acid, which includes RNA and DNA. So basically, each of these is a repeated length of many of these in a long chain. So there's two types. We talked about RNA, which is one single strand of these bonded together just in one long chain. And DNA is if we have two long chains of those nucleotides bonded together. Okay, so this is 2 and this is 1. One way you can compare and contrast proteins and nucleic acids, I forgot to fill in the words, I did. So proteins and nucleic acids, I think a really good analogy to use for these is the fact that proteins are like the apps and nucleic acids are like the coding software. There we go. I hope this works. I hope you can still see this. Just in case you can, I'm going to keep this like this. Okay, so if I zoom in, sorry, technical issues. Okay, so if you were to compare proteins and nucleic acids, I want you to think about your iPad. On your iPad are lots of different apps and programs that do lots of different jobs on your iPad. I feel like that's a really good analogy for your proteins. There's lots of different apps. Each of them does something different, but something important. Just like proteins, you have lots of different proteins in your cells, and each of them does a different job. Now, how those proteins know what to do is based on the coding software. So there's a hidden language behind these, and that hidden language tells these apps what to do. So I feel like this is a good analogy to think of in addition to like the one I mentioned with the store. You know, you've got a store, there's lots of employees, proteins that run around doing different jobs, and they know what to do based on the employee handbook, which is like the nucleic acid. All right, let's do a summary. So you can pause as I read aloud and answer each question, or you can listen as I read through them all. But I want you to, for each description, I want you to write if it's a protein.
Patty Drew dials 37502, Patty Drew 37502.
Okay, sorry. So for your summary, for each of these descriptions, I want you to write if it's a protein or if it's a nucleic acid. And if you want, you can use the letter P or the letters Na to represent that. So which of these two, protein or nucleic acid, is made of nucleotides? I want you to give a hint that look at the beginning part of the word as a clue. So number 1, what is made of nucleotides? Number 2, which of those two is made of amino acids? Number 3, which of these two is used to build strong cells like your muscle or your fingernails? Which of these provides instructions that tells a cell how to work? Number 5, which of these can be found as a single strand or double-stranded? Number 6, which of these is only found as long chains of monomers? This is a really tough one. I'm going to give you another clue here. It's long chains of amino acids. Number 7, which one of those two is like the apps that do jobs on your iPad? And number 8, which of these is like the software code of your iPad that tells it how to work? All right, if you want to check your answers, it is nucleic acid, protein, protein, nucleic acid, nucleic acid, protein, protein, nucleic acid. All right, how did you do? I hope you did okay. This is the first time you've learned this though, so it's okay if you missed a couple. All right, so just to recap, we have now learned about carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. I encourage you to use the Quizlet sets that I have linked in the class to continue to practice, especially before you take your quizzes on which you can do multiple attempts. Remember, the goal is to work towards mastery and improvement. You will never memorize things the first time, but it's oftentimes just small bits of repeated practice that will help you get better at understanding and remembering this stuff. I will also paste a link to a really great video that I encourage you to watch that does a really great job of helping explain each of these in a little bit of a different way than I do. If you have questions, send me a message. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.